Hello, hello. This is honestly kind of a bit ridiculous. This is like the fifth time I tried to record a video for this. Because I did the original version of this video, which I think I deleted. I don't think it's unlisted. I think I fully deleted it. Then I did a second version about a week ago and put that one up because I kind of managed to change a little bit of how the fog works here. I think I referenced that in a post here. Yeah, so I said I updated the way fog gets cleared, mostly due to changes in Sudoku Maker ever since when I first originally made this. And then just a little bit ago, like a half hour ago, I tried to record a third version of this to factor in the hints that I just added to all my posts because I didn't know how to do that until now. Now I know, and of course, I was kicking myself because now that's a new version of the video. Technically, I didn't need to, but I'm very much a perfectionist, so I was like, you know what, I will re-record this again just to get that included. And then while I was going through recording that one, I ran into all sorts of bizarre issues with Sudoku Pad throughout it, and eventually culminated in making it all the way to the very end of the solve just to find out that I messed up the way that it checks for solutions. And it was such a bizarre issue. I was like, I'm not editing all this. I'm just going to record this. So now I'm on attempt number 4 of doing this in total. So hopefully this goes smoother this time. I know how to solve this one very consistently at this point, so I'm probably going to go through this a bit quick. Just because I don't really feel like spending another half hour here, but yeah, so we have escaped the Foggy Liar. It's a sequel to Caged by a Secret Killer. It's not necessary to solve that, but it is recommended for the story. Not that this is some super in-depth essay story here, but... So we have two versions of the puzzle. One of the other updates I did recently was adding visual impairment-friendly versions, which was kind of just a more accessible term for saying colorblind and other issues one may have with recognizing, say, like the lines in the puzzle and kind of what they are and what they represent. Mostly colorblind. So the only difference here is that I added some abbreviations on the line to clarify what type of line they are. That's the only difference between the two links for the puzzle here. So the story says you've begun your escape from the killer, but have found yourself in a new area shrouded in fog and lying pathways. Those three in the corner cages seem suspicious. Had they betrayed you after all this time? That is a Crack in the Cryptic reference. If you're here, you're probably plenty familiar with them in that little joke. So, we have a lot of rules at play here. For the sake of time, I'm just going to run over these because most of them are pretty standard. So we have normal Sudoku rules, we have standard dynamic fog, so placing digits in the fog will clear fog, sometimes in other parts of the grid, not just directly underneath it. But if you do place a correct digit, it will clear the fog underneath it at minimum. We also have killer cage rules, although you can see something's up here because we have 2-3 cages in this row. We'll come back to that in a moment. Then we have German whisper lines, so adjacent digits are separate by at least 5. Arrows, if I draw an arrow here as an example, something like that, pretend there's a tip here, we would say that these two cells sum to whatever's in the circle. Arrow, so a black dot, somewhere in the grid there'll be at least one black dot in between cells, and that means one digit is double the other. XV clues, an X between cells, they sum to 10, V sums to 5. And then thermometer rules, so digits increase as they move away from the bulb. There's also some cosmetic green arrows that appear in between certain cells. They can be ignored, they're just cosmetic. The important part to highlight further here is that purple lines are liar lines. Cages touched by a liar line may or may not sum to their given total. The number of lying cages per liar line is specified by the grid's central digit, row 5, column 5, which must be deduced. Then there's some other stuff after I'll come back to in a second, but that's going to explain what's going on up here, because clearly we can't have 2-3 cages in the same row. So this line is indicating that some subset of these clues is lying. So we know at least one of them will be. We don't know exactly how many. It could potentially be all 4 cages lying. We don't know. But we do know at least one of them is, because certainly you can't have 2-3s here. Liar lines do not branch or cross each other. So if we determine a liar line is over here, it can't just do that. You also cannot have another liar line do something like that and cross over the other one. If a liar line enters a cage, then it will go through every cell in that cage. So if we say that was a cage, and this was a liar line segment that was visible, and that was kind of where it ended, maybe these were still shrouded in fog over here, we could say for sure that the line definitely must go through them. It might not necessarily go in that way. Maybe it could come out and then go back around like that. But what we do know from this is that the liar line must go through every cell in the cage in order for that to be valid. So, that is a lot of info there. But again, they're mostly standard rules. This is rated 2 stars even though I wouldn't say the difficulty itself is really necessarily 2 stars. It's really kind of just like novel usage of the liar line rule with existing things. It's mostly the fact that there's a lot of rules at play here, and it makes it kind of tricky to think about what's coming next. But the way we want to start this is, let's see, I have my hints over here on the right, where I just make sure that I read them out in the right order here. So, hint number 1. So again, don't watch past this if you're not ready for hint number 1. Is there can only be up to 4 lying clues on the first liar line, since there are 4 cages in row 1. That sounds obvious, but what that means is that this can only be 1 through 4. It can't be any bigger, because there isn't 5 cages that are lying up here. If this was, for example, 5, or 6, or 7, there's not enough cages that could be lying for that to make sense. So this must be limited to 1 through 4. And says that, along with the German whisper line, significantly restricts what row 5, column 5 could be. So, taking into account German whispers, this would not be able to be a 3 or a 4, because we would break Sudoku by having to have at least a couple digits 5 away from them. For example, a 3 here would need 8, 9, 8, 9, and 8, 9 spread across 3 cells. The final part of the hint says, from there, you can prove that one option leads to a contradiction. So, let's start with 1 here, and see if we can see if that breaks anything. So, if this was a 1, we already know that at least one of these 3 cages must be lying. So let's just say, for example, it's this. The logic will be symmetrical here, because it really doesn't matter. We're just choosing one of them at random here. So if we determine there's a problem with this one lying, we know there would be a problem with that one lying in a similar fashion. Yeah, so if we determine one is lying, then we certainly know then, by extension, that the other 3 must be truthful. So I'm marking them green. And here is where we get the classic little secret, Sudoku secret, that comes up all the time in Cracking the Cryptic videos, so I'm sure you're familiar with it, but just in case you're not, a full row of the digits 1 to 9, always, or a full row will be the digits 1 through 9, always, and those always sum to 45. That's just a fact of life. It does not matter if there's lying cages in the row. The fact that lying cages exist doesn't take away anything from the fact that there will still be the numbers 1 to 9 once each in the row. So the overall sum of these digits must be 45, no matter what. We know that this is an 11 cage, and that's 28, and that's 3. So if we do the math on that, 28 and 11 gives you 39, and 3 then brings you to 42. So these collectively sum to 42 in this scenario. That would mean that this would need to be a 3 in order to reach that 45 total. But we just predicated all of this on saying that this cannot be 3, because it's lying. That was the assumption we made here. So that's a contradiction. We're saying this can't be 3, but then if we say that can't be 3, the rest of the row sum forces this to be 3, which is, again, a contradiction. That cannot be the case. So we can say that this cage is not a single cell, or a single cage that is lying. And again, if we do the same thing over here, and say this one's lying, we get the exact same thing, because these are just the same totals again, 28, 11, and 3. And so we know that at least one of the 3 cages is lying, so the fact that it didn't work, no matter what you do with that, means there cannot be just one lying clue in that line. There must be 2. Now, we don't know if it's the other 3. Maybe it's both 3 cages lying, or maybe it's the 3 and the 28, or one of the 3s and the 11. We don't know, but we do know it can't just be one cage that is lying. Continuing from there, we now have a 9 cage over here that was revealed that does not have any liar line segments in it. So we can say this is a truthful 5 cage, or 9 cage, that has a V in it, so that's 1, 2, 3, or 4, or rather 1 and 4, or 2 and 3. Either way, that's a V clue inside of a 9 cage, so the remaining bit must be 4. That can't be now can't be 4 and 1. We have a new portion of a liar line revealed over here, which may or may not connect down here. We don't know where it's going. We can also pencil mark our high digits here on the German whisper. And then we have a 6 cage over here revealed that is at least 2 cells big. If we can see, it dips down into the fog. And we know, just by cage logic, it certainly can't be any bigger than that, solely because of the fact that if we make it 4 cells big, the minimum they would sum to, those 4 digits, would be 1, 2, 3, 4, summing to 10. That's too big. So this definitively must be exactly 3 cells big, and it must be made of 1, 2, 3, which is the only way to do that. So now this is where hint number 2 comes in. Hint number 2 says, pay attention to classic Sudoku whenever pairs or triples in the grid reveal themselves. Sometimes this can result in cages being impossible to sum to their total, which means they are definitively lying. So what we can take away from that, obviously the fact that it mentions a pairs and triples is clearly referring to these here, because we just revealed those. We have triple here, but they don't kind of coalesce into any particular spot of the grid. What that is saying is we have a 2, 3 in the column here, so nowhere else in the column can have a 3 in it. This 3-cell cage here, or this 3-sum cage, certainly cannot be a 3 cage now. Similar for this one. This one up here also cannot be a 3, so that must be that. So that tells us both these corner cages are lying. These two must be truthful now. So now that we've worked that out, we can do more summing logic using row 1 here, because we now know for sure 28 and 11 sum together. So we can take it for a fact that these two cages here collectively in this row sum to 39. And that means the remaining 2 spots here must sum to 6. Which, again, you could work that out already from the fact that we now know the 2 truthful cages are there and the 2 3s left over sum to 6, but we know it can't be just 3 and 3. So this is going to be 1 and 5 or 2 and 4. But we could do a lot better than that, because both of the cages here in the columns not only have 3s in them, they both have 2s as well. So this could certainly not be 2, 4, making that up. And then even better than that, this cage has a 1 in it. So that is definitely not a 1. That must be 5, that must be 1. That now reveals another 3 cage down in the bottom right corner here. So you can see clearly I was going for the 3 in the corner reference to the extreme here. Yeah, so now we have a bunch of new stuff revealed. Besides that, we have a little more of this liar line and this cage revealed now. We have more of the German whisper here, along with a black dot and an arrow here. There's a lot going on in the center couple columns here. And this is where hint number 3 comes in. Hint number 3 says, minimizing the numbers on the box 5 arrow will lead to row 3, column 5 being pretty restricted. So row 3, column 5 is this here. It makes sense, that's kind of on top of the arrow here, so it makes sense to kind of look there. The general strategy we would think of for a lot of arrows is to try to minimize or maximize them. In the case of arrows, I generally start with minimizing, because you can only go so big on an arrow, since the sum would have to be a single-digit number to fit into a circle. There are variants that use pills instead, we call them, where you could have double-digit numbers, but that's always very explicitly said in the rules. This says circle, so this is meant to be a single-digit sum. So if we try to minimize these, we would have 1, 3, and 4. And the question you would maybe then ask is, could we make any of these bigger? So if we took the 1 and increased it, certainly couldn't be a 2. If not, it would need to be a 3, which would then kind of create a snaking effect. So we're going to have to not increase the 1. If we increase the 3, it becomes a 4, and that doesn't work. So if we're increasing any of these, the 4 would have to increase to a 5. And if we were to do that, we would have 1, 3, 5, which sums to 9. And that is a problem, because that would mean the sum has to go here, because you couldn't make it any bigger. The sum would have to be 9, and that would be on a black dot, which does not work. That doesn't work. So that tells us for sure that this must be 1, 3, and 4. 5, 6 left over in the box here now. And that's just, again, because if we made any of those numbers bigger, we would lead to a problem with placing the circle somewhere. So, given that, we now know these are 1, 3, and 4. So these 3 collectively sum to 8. So the question now would be, could we put an 8 here? Because it could potentially be that this is just another portion of the arrow. It might not necessarily be the circle. And so if we put an 8 here, that at first glance would seem fine. But it doesn't actually work, because that would require a 4 over here. And a 4 here breaks, because we'd be stuck with double 9s in the column now, in order to satisfy the German whisper aspect. So this is also, you could say now, not an 8. So a lot of people, sometimes solving this, they rush through this part and they put the 8 there and then they realize it's a mistake. Or they see that and they think they broke the puzzle. Because it's not immediately obvious that you could just continue the arrow here, and that's kind of intentional. I was trying to be a little mischievous with this. So, the reality is, this sums to 8. This is not the end of the arrow. That is just another portion of the arrow. And the only number you could put there would be a 1. So that way now the arrow sums to 9 total. We can see it must go to the right. So that must be where the 9 goes. Alright, and so that does a little bit of Sudoku now. We have a 1 here on a black dot. That must be a 2. Now 1 and 2 in this row give us a 3 over here. Something else we can do that we haven't done yet is looking up here at the cages that we know are truthful, because we can actually work out what those totals, or what they're made up of now. You could, do this in your head if you wanted, but I'm going to use the cage calculator. We can't have a 1 in it, we can't have a 5 in it. So the 11 cage must be 2, 3, 6. And that gives us 4, 7, 8, 9 for the 28 cage. So 9's not on the right half of it, it's over here. 3 isn't on this part of this cage, so that must be a 3 there. 2, 6 means that's not a 2. That's a 1 and a 2 there. This 2 on the German Wizard gives us 7, 8, 9 there. So that actually gives us a 4, 7, 8 triple up here, so we can get 5, 6 there. We could pencil mark this. I'm not going to bother with that right now. But we do now have a 3 looking down here, so that must be 4, that must be 1, that must be 4, that must be 3. So, this is now enough information to work out this left portion, or this left liar line. Because we have 1 lying, we certainly know the 3 is lying. The 1 could be truthful, it could be lying, we don't know. But what we can say is the 7 cage is not possible to fill now. And so there's 2 ways you can see that. The first is to recognize that a 7 cage must be no bigger than 3 cells big. Just because any bigger, you have the same issue with the 6, you'd overshoot the total. Further than that, we also know it certainly wouldn't be allowed to grow either way, because that would require the line to be branching, which, again, it cannot do. But yeah, so this would need to be made of 1, 2, and 4. But we can't have a 2 in any of these cells by Sudoku. Further than that, we can also see 1, 2, and 4 also are completely ruled out of here, so this could never be any part of the cage. So, in 2 different ways, we could say that is not a truthful cage. That must be lying, which means the 1 cage is truthful, and we can put a 1 right there. And so that reveals the little portion of a thermometer here. Again, we don't know how far the thermometer stretches necessarily, but we can say that it must be increasing as we move down this direction. And further than that, we also have an X. So we can do a couple things there. We can say for sure that this must be the low end of the X, and that must be the big end. But this certainly isn't going to be a 1, because this is the middle of the thermometer. So it's not 1, not 9. 2 in the column means that's not 2, that's not 8. And then even better than that, we have a 6 on the column as well. So this can't be 6, that can't be 4. That gives us 3 and 7 there. Now we need a 1 or a 2 to be smaller than this, and it cannot be a 2, so that must be a 1. That's the beginning of the thermometer. This 7 now looks up here, and that takes out a bunch of options here. That gives us 8, 9, 4, 7. 4 and 7 come out from there. The 7 here and the 9 there come out from 8 there, and 7 here. That now gives us a whole bunch of stuff over here. We have a little mini thermometer there and an arrow over here. I will say the arrow being revealed this early is a little bit of a tease. You can certainly do some thinking about it, but you're going to need a little more info from the rest of the grid in order to actually progress further. And that is where hint number 4 comes in. Hint number 4 is, rows 1 to 3 have a lot of classic Sudoku deductions you can do. In particular, there's a sneaky naked single available in one of the cells that is not very obvious at first, but it is crucial for continuing. So if we remind ourselves, a naked single is when a single cell can only be one thing. So if we worked out that it was like a 1, 2, 3 there, 4, 5, 6 here, and a 7 and 8 here, for example, then we could say that this could not be 1, 2, 3, because the column has a 1, 2, 3. Can't have a 4, 5, 6, because there, and it can't be a 7, 8 from there. That would be an example of a naked single, because in reality, even though there's a bunch of things looking at it in different ways, all of them are ruled out except for 9 in that scenario. So that's the sort of thing we're going to be looking for in the top 3 rows here. But we need to do a little bit more just deductions to even get to that point first. Actually, I think you could probably spot it now, but I'm going to do a little more work here first anyways. So we have a thermometer here, so it's probably worth pencil marking the 4 numbers here now. We have 2, no, not 2, 4, 7, 8, 9. 8's not on the top, 9's not on the bottom. 8 would not be on the left half here, there's nothing bigger that it could be on the right. 4 similarly, can't have anything smaller than that over there. Okay, no, yeah, no, we do need to spot the naked single now. So, take a minute, look for that. Now I will point out the naked single is in this cell. It sees 1, it sees 2, 3, 4, it sees 5, 6, and it sees 8, 9. So this must be a 7. And now that's important, because 7 comes out from here. This gives us a 4, 9 pair, so that cannot be 4. that must be 7, that must be 8. That is important now for giving us a little bit of fog over here, and it gives us a third liar line over here. But I'm going to continue pencil marking over here for a second. We need 4, 5, 6 here, and here we need a 2, 3. So those are not resolved quite yet. But cleaning up the grid, this cannot be a 5 because it's on a black dot. So that's a 6, that's a 3, 5 there, 2 and 3 in the cage, 2, 3 there. So now we have hint number 5, because this arrow is a little bit tricky to work out, and that's kind of what hint 5 is going to help with. So hint 5 says, the arrow in columns 7 and 8 is tricky to work out. The most important deduction that is relevant involves where 7 can go in box 9. Once you spot that, think about what numbers must be and can't be on the arrow. So, it mentions 7 pretty directly, so let's take a look at 7. 7 in box 9. 7 is ruled out from here. 7 is also ruled out from there. So we must have 7 in this little quadrant here, but we can do a little better, because 7 is too big of a number to put on this arrow. We need 3 cells here. If you put a 7 in either of these, and then minimize the other 2 to be a 1 and a 2, you'd end up with a minimum sum of 10, and you cannot put a 10 here. So 7 is too big for the arrow. So the takeaway from that is that 6 is the biggest number you can put on a 3-cell arrow like this. So that puts 7 inside this cage here. Now, that's not the most useful thing right away, just because we don't know if this cage is lying or truthful yet. But regardless, it does have a 7 in it. That part is truthful, because Sudoku, the actual classic Sudoku aspect of this, does not lie, per se. So we know there's a 7 here. It's just the question is whether it goes with a 4 to sum to 11, or if it's lying and it goes with something else. The reason that that is important for actually continuing, though, is we can now look at the 13 cage over here, and question maybe this is truthful or lying. Maybe we can work that out. Well, if it's truthful, then it's one of these options. 4, 9, 5, 8, 6, 7. And we will find 4 can't go in either spot, so it's not 4, 9. 5 can't go in either spot, so it's not 5, 8. And if it was 6, 7, it would have to be in this order of 7 here, 6 underneath. So you could probably see the problem now is the fact that if this was to be truthful, it would need a 7 in it. But 7 is not possible to go here, because 7 is going here in the column. So there are no valid ways to make this 13 cage sum up to 13. That must be lying, which means this one is truthful. That means this is, in fact, a 4, 7 cage summing to 11. That leaves us with 6, 8, and 9 left over in the column here. 6 and 8 there. And more importantly, this is now going to allow us to rule out some options for the arrow a little more clearly here. There are ways you could skip past this without thinking about that. In fact, it wasn't really intended, but I've seen some people, in fact, most people solving this don't even think about the liar line here that much because they don't recognize that trick with the 13 cage. They're able to sort of brute force through the arrow without that. It wasn't really intended, but it is something you could do. I just want to point out the intended path here. So, the other thing we need to spot in order to remove some options here is to notice by Sudoku, 1s and 3s are pretty restricted. 1 and 3 goes there. And so that puts a lot of pressure onto how small the digits could be here, because we can't have a 1, 3, or a 4 on this portion of the arrow. So at minimum, these would be a 2 and a 5, summing to 7. So even in the smallest case possible, you would never be able to have anything bigger than a 2 on this here, because if you minimize these 2 and 5 to 7, going any bigger than that, you get a problem. So the fact that this can't be a 2 by Sudoku, we now know there must be a 1 here. That gives us 3 and 1. But that was not all the pencil marking we could have done. You know, we could potentially put a 6 on here. The 6 would be valid. We could put a 1, 2, 6 here. That would also be fine. If that was a 1, 2, 6, that would sum to 9. And if it's 1, 2, 5, it would sum to 8. So both of those seem fairly equally likely at this point. But again, this is not RNG. This is not random. I say either is equally likely. There's not really randomness here. We can use logic. So this is either 2, 5 or 2, 6. Either way, there's a 2 on it. As soon as you recognize there's a 2 on it, this column now can't have a 2 up here. That must be 6. That must be 2. And that 6 means this is definitely not a 1, 2, 6 arrow. This is a 1, 2, 5 arrow summing to 8. That now gives us the remaining bits of this column for the most part, because we have 6 and 9 there, as well as an 8 in the corner. finish off this box. We did a 6-9 there. The 6-9 means that's not 9, that's a 4, that's a 9. And yeah, so we are almost done. That was it for all the hints, so this last part, you're on your own. Obviously, you're watching the video, you can continue, but no hints for the end. So, it is important that we have the 8 over here, and that is because 8 is pretty hard to place in this column. Or even in this box in general, because we have 8 ruled out from here. And we also have 8 here, just this is also 1, 3, 7. And now 8 is ruled out from that spot. So 8 is in one of these two here. But within that, we can see there's a problem with one of these. Because if we made this an 8, that's on the sub-portion of a circle here. That would need to be bigger than it. Which would mean that would have to be a 9, but it can't be a 9 because we have a 9 in the column. So that is definitely not an 8. That must be 8. And now, if you were thinking ahead about where these arrows could go, and then you were surprised by it, you're not alone. These were, again, similar to this arrow up here. This was kind of intentionally designed to trip people up a little bit. Many people, before placing that, just kind of assume the arrow goes this way, and they start thinking about what could these three things sum to, and then they place a number here. And that does actually allow you to deduce an 8 here, I believe, but it's kind of for the wrong reasons, which wasn't really intentional. It actually kind of just proved to be sort of a funny little haha fooled you kind of moment, because I've seen more than one person solving this where they place an 8 here, thinking the arrow goes like this, and then they see they actually go like this, and they're like, oh, wait, hold on, I used the wrong logic there. So, again, trying to be a little mischievous here is kind of fun, but either way, 8 does go here. And that now is going to disambiguate the rest of the grid, just based on how these arrows could fill. That's certainly not a 9. That must be 6 with 2. 9, 5, 2. And then this, the only way to make this arrow work, just by Sudoku, is a 1, 5, 6 arrow. Now, because that is it for variant logic, I am going to breeze through this part here just to get this over with. 3 and not 8. 5 in the column, that's 5 and 3. This is 4 and 7. That's 4 and 9. 7, 4. 5, 6. This only has one number missing. That is a 5. 6, 5. 4, 6, 5. 7, 9. 1, 6, 8. 7, 8. And then finally, 2, 4, 9. 9, 2, 4. But the reason I realized there was a problem with this was finishing the most recent attempt of this, and the solution did not pop up there. It said it was wrong, even though the answer was definitively correct. So, whatever, I fixed it. But so now we have the conclusion. As you stumble through the darkness, you found a pathway of green arrows leading you to the only truthful 3 cage. You can now continue your escape, ... And that's a sneaky little thing. You can see the arrows pointing you across the grid here. That is our only truthful 3 cage. Not part of a liar line. That was just a sneaky little thing that most people don't even notice until the end of the puzzle. That once you place a 3 here just by Sudoku, it reveals, oh, that was actually a cage. So this is the only 3 cage that you can trust. You can see it kind of sneakily placed itself next to one of the lying 3s in the corner. So it's not quite a 3 in the corner, but it's almost a 3 in the corner. And that means that is a truthful 3. So that's going to be sort of your trapdoor to escape. It says, to be continued. I have not made a 3rd entry in this series yet, even though it's been almost, in a couple days, it'll be a year since this came out. I don't have anything in the works immediately for like a 1-year anniversary sort of thing. It's funny that when I put out the first one in the series, the Cage by Secret Killer, that was February 24, then January 25, and the original ending to this puzzle here had a hopefully in less than a year this time, smiley face. I wasn't planning on it taking a year again, but here we are. So it's definitely going to be more than a year because I haven't even started to work on a sequel to this yet. I have ideas, but I haven't actually like settled down into any of them yet. It just hasn't been the priority yet. But I do want to do more at some point. Anyways, I've done enough rambling, so thank you for watching.